1980 was a big year for Ruggero Deodato. He followed up his controversial classic Cannibal Holocaust with a lesser known but still very controversial film, The House on the Edge of the Park. The contradictory portrayals of tenderness and sexual violence make this a film you don't want to look at but cannot look away from. I'm the Italian Horror Guy, and this is the Italian Horror Guy podcast. So, there's obviously quite a bit of housekeeping, so to speak, pardon the pun, under the circumstances, especially at this recording. The great man, according to some, has passed away within the last couple of days. I woke up a couple of mornings ago to find out that the great footballer Pelé had died, as well as Ruggero Deodato. And it was a very sad morning for me. He's infamous, is Ruggero. But I think the film that I'm going to be talking about today is really a great example of a great example, I think, of the elements of some of the elements of Cannibal Holocaust coming across in a number. The fact that it came across in a number of his films, not just that one. I've talked about Jungle Holocaust before. There was a Deodato film. I think I've alluded to Cut and Run, and I think what really makes these films not necessarily great, but certainly worth talking about and thinking about, 40 years plus after they were made, is that they clearly have some kind of effect on you. And, I would like to point out, as I'm sure my loyal listeners are aware, I haven't done an episode for a long time, and I'm very glad to be back, sorted out a few life things. And this as the order of episodes will indicate, and I think I would have previewed on the previous episode, this was going to be my next episode anyway. And I actually watched The House on the Edge of the Park about a week ago, soon before Ruggero's passing. And like every time I watch this film, which tends to be every few years or so, it's always a really confusing experience, because maybe on a lesser scale, but not always on a lesser scale, just certainly lesser in terms of fame and infamy. But, the height of the emotions that this film pushes you towards, it is a very similar type of thing to what we get in Cannibal Holocaust. And it's that I think it's Riz Ortolani again, who, yes, it is, I've just looked that up, who provides the score for this film. And it's, obviously we understand with Cannibal Holocaust, but also Don't Torture a Duckling, which I believe was Riz as well. Like these tender pieces of music being contrasted with really awful, horrifying imagery. I would like to think that it's this kind of stuff that really maybe justifies isn't the right word, but it does provide some kind of legitimacy, I think, to, like, we all understand just watching these films and enjoying maybe the absurdity. Maybe we want to see violence. Maybe we don't want to sort of have a nice thought-provoking intellectual session. But, I really feel like across the board in a lot of different types of Italian horror, and as you know, I've sort of cast a very wide net when defining Italian horror for the purpose of this podcast, that there's so often a lot of depth going on, and to lend it legitimacy, it probably does need that, because maybe you can get away with a slasher film, shall we say, even though those are generally associated with some kind of sexuality or sexual violence. But there's something a little bit more throwaway about them. But when you start adding the kind of imagery that you see in Cannibal Holocaust, but even a lot of the imagery that you see in this film, in order to justify its existence, that you probably need to. There probably needs to be moments that are actually quite powerful, um, uh, or at least I guess what's being reflected here in this little rambling opening is that I have trouble with this film because you know one it's endless in its merit. I think it's such a meritorious film, but um, on my DVD, I think it's just looking, yeah, it's the Shameless version. I think I know there are interviews on it. I was watching the Deodato and David Hess interviews that are on it, and it's so interesting to note that Deodato talks about how um, you or that he naturally sympathised with um, David Hess and Giovanni Lombardo Radice's characters, which I'll just it's Alex. That's right, Alex and Ricky. They are very much Alex and Ricky's actually. But that you sympathise with their characters. But I think as I'll unpack as we go along, I the frustration with this film for me is that it's actually a missed opportunity, and I suspect I don't know. Maybe the answer to this is somewhere in those interviews, but I actually suspect it's sort of there are moments where it's accidentally brilliant. In fact, I have some proof of this that I'll actually talk about. Um, but there's also elements of it that make me think, if they put a little bit more thought and care into the editing, or should I say the order of events, then that desire that Deodato has for us, I think, to sympathise with Alex and Ricky, but especially Alex, because I think we do sort of sympathise with Ricky. That the film sort of steals away our chance to sympathise with him. So anyway, I guess I'll get into the order of the film. It seems like a good place to get into it. So we start with Alex driving through New York, which I believe there's these sort of shots that are cut between these sort of random stock images of New York, and then Alex, who I believe, or David Hess, who I believe is driving in a car in Rome or north of Rome somewhere. And he does quite humorously talk about that in that interview. That he's very much from New York, which you can tell he is very authentic. He has that real New York presence about him, David Hess. But yeah, it's that sort of that brilliant, or maybe brilliant is not the right word, but that vibe you get from these sort of hybrid Italian horror films that are totally exploitative. House on the Edge of the Park with David Hess is very clearly trying to be evocative of The Last House on the Left. Like, I think any horror fan would recognise that straight off the bat. But nonetheless, I think often that kind of thing does really play into the sort of unique elements of Italian horror films, that sense that they're very obviously trying to depict a place and a time, or sorry, maybe place is just a better way of putting that, but without being able to probably depict it. And I think, like, not necessarily that the result is what they were aiming for, but it does come up with this uncanny thing, because when you're watching this film and it does take place mainly in the house, or the rich people's house, you don't really feel like it's New York. You very much feel like it's Deodato trying to do New York. And just on that, like, one thing that's really in favor of this film, again, maybe accidentally, is it's it's hard to remember watching a movie that feels cheaper than this, but without it actually, but that doesn't make it feel in and of itself like a negative. Because, like, if you think about it, like, they have the stock footage, maybe stock footage isn't the right term, but the footage that they collect from New York, and then David Hess driving around, and then the rest of it just happens in a house with these actors that half of them aren't even actors, and it's just things happening, like. And this is very much the nature of not having much of a budget, and you can really feel how cheap it was. But you know, it works just well enough so it feels legitimate because it's so gritty. But again, as I go on, I think I'll naturally talk about this. That the most legitimate aspects of the film, or some of the most legitimate aspects of the film, really are when you can actually feel that these actors, in inverted commas, some of which I looked up and they these are their only credits, or they're like models, or they were models or something. They were probably actually quite horrified at what they were seeing, which is why some of those shots, as you go on, like they're half acting and half legitimate, I think. And that's because the fact of the matter is, there are moments where you're very moved by the situation, and when you sort of take stock for a moment and think about it, it's like, well, why am I moved by this? Why are these nonsense actors moving me like this? And the answer is, with David Hess leading and a couple of lesser actors doing okay, and a couple of non-actors looking horrified, you can get great shots if you do horrible things, I guess. So yeah, as I say, we'll get into that as we go along. So straight off the bat in this film, we have that mixture of, or that contrast of tenderness and violence, and I think it's hard to tell because I can only associate it with this film, but I reckon that "Sweetly Oh Sweetly" song it's pleasant, but it's got that, it's almost got that quality about it that the lullaby does in Deep Red, where it's like it's just off enough to be like, yeah, I can sort of feel like it's, in this case, it's like it's so sweet, it's sickening almost. And it just makes for difficult, troubling viewing because in the right context, it could be a lullaby that you play to get a 2-year-old to go to sleep. Maybe 2-year-old is it not a good example? Maybe a 2-month-old. So my lack of children is probably showing there, but definitely it's showing in suggesting playing Ruggero Deodato, Riz Ortolani themes. But so Sweetly, I think it's just called Sweetly, according to YouTube it is anyway, is playing whilst David Hess or Alex rapes and I know murders this woman. I don't know if it's made entirely clear. Like, I think there's a shot for a few seconds of her lying there, and I think it's meant to imply that, but I don't think that scene's done well enough to sort of, and it's probably not that important because like it gets alluded to a little bit as the film goes on, and frankly, if we didn't know for certain, that wouldn't be such a bad thing in the context of the power of the film, because the blonde guy who reveals at the end that it was his sister, that girl that you murdered in the park, I think that's the first definitive proof we have of it, and in some way that sort of makes it that bit more powerful. So I want to just refer again to that interview that I was talking about of Deodato saying how he uh, naturally sympathizes with those characters. He talks in that interview about how he always sympathizes with the underdog. And this is a problem because, and the problem again is I'm not sure they thought through it well. Now, far be it from me to show up 40 years later and a couple of days after the great man's death. But obviously, I mean, I was going to do this episode anyway, and it's been really thought provoking and, um, you know, really encouraged me to go and do it after he passed. But anyway, he, I actually just feel like if this film had shuffled around the order of events, it would go from confusing and, at least in my reckoning, from confusing and I wish it was really good to it is actually really good, but obviously disturbing. The problem is the film feels like it's chasing its tail for about an hour, trying to get us to feel sympathy for Alex. And it nearly gets us somewhere. And one thing I will say that, as I'll move on to momentarily, the scene where the great scene, one of the best depictions of sociopathy that I've ever seen, where he's just stabbed Ricky and and he's sort of like getting Ricky on. It was like, yeah, me and you, we understand. It's them that made me stab you. Like it's utter genius. Now, I guess you could argue if we didn't definitively know that he was a murderer at that point, maybe these actions would seem a bit silly. In fact, now that I'm thinking about it, I think there's a good chance that the film would actually be relying a little bit too much on the fact that it assumes we've seen the last house on the left. Because, he's basically Krug again. Maybe not as extreme, but nonetheless, I still think, put it this way, if Deodato wanted us to feel sympathy for him, then we simply wouldn't have had the scene at the start of the film, because there is sympathy to be had. I think we sympathise a lot with Ricky, like quite a lot, because like there's just something so ineffectual about him that even the horrible things he ends up doing, you can tell it's like he's the lapdog, he's the Robin to the Batman, right? And when it gets to the really extreme stuff, he backs out and is clearly disturbed. So I guess you could possibly, I'm just thinking about it now. You could possibly remove not only the scene from the start, but that whole aspect of the story. Like, just think about. My feeling, as I've said, coming away from this film is one of a little bit of confusion because it's thrown me in these emotional directions, but where my emotion is generally directed is towards the two monsters in the film, or the 1.2 monsters, shall we say. And that's confusing because Alex plus a bit of Ricky are very clearly monstrous. And we never get to know the woman at the start. And also at the end, when the brother realizes that he is the brother, it's like like that dude's such a douchebag. Like, the film wants us to feel like he's a douchebag the whole time, and then there's that line where he's all, if you if you don't know how to use one of these things, You can let a whole round. I don't know what he says, but it's just like, who the fuck's this guy? But see, the problem. So right. What I'm proposing this film do with itself 42 years after it's been released is if just hear me out. If you take away the scene at the start and you take away that whole story and they're just a couple of like the people that go to the to Alex's shop, maybe like if you do this angle where they're just these rich people that are like let's get these uh, lower class people and let's bring them to a party and let's just make a mockery of them. But Alex is also a piece of shit who like brings his knife and um, smashes the bottle and keeps them all hostage. But he's done that as a result of them bullying Ricky. We might be thrown in a few different directions, right? Because the film is very, very clearly doesn't want us to find at least the main ringleaders in the main rich ringleaders. It doesn't want us to like them particularly. The problem is, by contrast, it's like, well, they're sort of dicks, but we don't like whatever because Alex is like they're dicks, but Alex is a rapist and a murderer. But then that's made even worse by the revelation that, well, they already knew that he was an evil bastard and this was the plan. Because when you know that, it's like, well, maybe this isn't even their nature anyway. They're just doing it because he deserved it. So I guess what I'm saying is there's enough there for the film to have actually been excellent, but instead it's a film that finds wanting a little bit, but is nonetheless utterly engrossing to watch. So that covers the very start of the film, and of course, having Sweetly playing while uh, Alex is doing what he's doing. It's also, I don't think there are any good rape scenes, but this is a particularly hard one to watch. If I really want to analyze a rape scene, which I'm not sure I do, but I will anyway. It actually does a really effective job of depicting Alex's character in this film as very impulsive and unable to control himself, whereas Krug in Last House on the Left is very calculating. Not necessarily that what he does is like smart, or obviously it's not good, but you still get the sense that he does it in a context that you feel he's going to get away with it, or that like he's in control of whether he wants to do it, and part of it is that the torture is the point. Whereas Alex in this film is like, it's not necessarily that the torture is the point at first. He's just got out of control urges, and he doesn't really care about the result. And then as the film goes on, we end up with him becoming more torturous, which maybe doesn't necessarily fly with exactly fly with everything that we're seeing, but at the same time that again provides for some of the I'm loath to use the word best, but some of the best parts of this film, but also comfortably the most disturbing. So we move on. They're in the shop, the mechanic shop, whatever you call it. Ricky, they pretty efficiently and effectively establish this relationship. That Alex is sort of, it's a bit homoerotic, it's a bit father son, it's a bit, Alex establishing himself as sort of an alpha in some regard, but you can see that it's like he could only get someone as lost and pathetic, shall we say, as Ricky to provide that role, and I apologize if, as I go on, I do sort of mention the opening scene too much and why it's undermined. But anyway, when the uh, yeah, so sorry, so he's talking about he's talking to Ricky about this story of some cop snooping around too much and going and saying really loudly what happened to some other cop's family or whatever. And Ricky's all, oh, you sure know how to take care of things, Alex. And it's just like, it's all a bit cringe and a bit pathetic. But at the same time, where the film, I think, just gets away with its depiction of Ricky is that it entirely commits to that depiction. Like, it throws him into the film as quite infantile and it feels unrealistic. But, and look, it probably is. But it sticks to that all the way. And, I must say, maybe I won't end up speaking enough about Ricky's character. Ricky is quite a brilliant character in this film in many ways, because the confusion that you feel about this film after having watched it, I think, with Ricky, it's totally justified, that confusion, because he is sympathetic. He does try to stop Alex. He does also do horrible things that make him maybe irredeemable, but then you consider the fact that he sort of stops himself doing them, and also the fact that he's done them at the behest of Alex, and the fact that he seems a little bit mentally deficient, shall we say. So yeah, I feel like all the good elements of the film are channeled into Ricky. Not that outside of Ricky there aren't good elements of it, but yeah, they all show up in Ricky in some way. So the two yuppies are driving around, we'll call them. The blonde guy turns out to be the victim's brother, and the his friend who does a lot of teasing of Alex as we go on. And I was thinking about this earlier, where just before a couple of hours ago, when I was thinking about this podcast, and I was thinking about her, because when I watched, I thought, who is it that she reminds me of? And it was Mary Poppins, of all, like, the sort of the early first few scenes of Mary Poppins, when she's got that really stern face quite a lot. There's something about the blank sort of I don't know, unsmiling this character and Mary Poppins. Anyway, I thought that was a pretty funny thing to notice. That sort of proper something, but turns out to be a bit of a muckraker, which, if that's a word, which actually, so does Mary Poppins. But anyway, we'll move away from that. So the film, right from the start, tries to get you to dislike these yuppie characters, which is sort of humorous, because at this point, we're like, 2 minutes ago we just watched Alex rape and murder someone. So it's like, the film right from the start sort of sets Alex and Ricky up in opposition to the other characters we see, which means it's hard to dislike them, really. Or at least maybe we dislike them, but when there's will a 20 do it? When all that's going on, the film feels like it's trying to make us go, oh, these people may be rich, but they're not that smart. They don't understand. And I think even Alex is saying you don't really understand how cars work and stuff. But it's like, well, A, he is quite obviously playing that up. But B, we don't know this guy, and we don't know that he's murdered anyone. So it's like, well, just be a dick to Alex. Alex deserves it, whether this guy knows Alex is a dick or not, right? Because we do. Anyway, the first, I think, really effective moment that happens in this film is, I think it's quite subtle, is that the film's already shown us very clearly that Alex is like a very negative alpha male type, right? In that he's raped and murdered someone, and don't cancel me. You know what I mean when I say that. I'm not saying that You know what I mean? And he's a fix-it guy. He's a mechanic. He's physically quite a bit bigger than Ricky, but also he's a lot older, and he's in charge. Ricky's sucking up to him and all that. Then we get the first moment, I think, where we actually like Alex a little bit. Um, the blonde guy, when they're sort of, well, Ricky's just sort of gone and like, oh, I can fix it real good, can I, Alex? And it's pretty funny. So he goes and does that, and while that's happening, the blonde guy goes to Alex and says, "Oh, listen, we don't have to bring this guy along, do we?" Because obviously they're asking him to come to their house, and I can't remember exactly what the quote is, but you know, he's very very sympathetic towards him. Like, and you can tell it's a moment where the yuppie guy is trying to get Alex on side, right? This is why it's important. Okay, I'm getting there. I'm nailing what I mean now. He's trying to get Alex on side because he assumes that this sniveling little sidekick guy, Alex, doesn't like him. So even though, he plans on murdering Alex later, Alex obviously doesn't know this right now. He's trying to be like, hey, look, let's, he simultaneously isn't going to bring this spare to their house because they don't know him and he's not the person they want to murder. We find all that out later. But he's doing that whilst also trying to, like, let's get Alex on side. But he misses the mark there. Like, right from that point, Alex is never going to be on board with the yuppies. And, the quality of and again, I can't remember what he says, but it's something along the lines of, he's my friend and I said he was going to be coming along with me tonight. Right. And that's back to the opening scene. If that's not there, we're more likely to be quite sympathetic towards this because it's like Alex doesn't discriminate. Like, he is, let's say, a lower rung of society, at least in terms of finances. But in many ways, or like in every way, Ricky's lower than Alex. He's not an alpha. He's sniveling. He's younger. He's just an assistant or a sidekick, whatever the hell he is. But Alex likes and respects him. So that kind of thing could be important, right? If the film really wants us to dislike these rich people, and it really does want us to like Ricky and Alex, or Alex and Ricky. Nonetheless, this does all contribute to our overall feelings of sympathy towards Ricky as the film goes on. So, there it is. Yeah, Alex said he told him he could come along. You can tell he really cares about him. They see him get his knife, so, they drive. I can't remember how long. I don't think I'm not even sure there is a scene, actually. Do they just show up at the house? Anyway, so we have all this preamble, and then the film just happens in the house, and there's the park, if memory serves. I'm not sure there's a single scene away from it. All we get at one point later in the film is a man walking his dog just slightly outside of the house. And we see that for about 3 seconds. But other than that, the film is basically confined to this little area. And again, that's the cheap aspect of the film coming through. So there's that woman from Cannibal Ferox, and it's quite interesting that she's in this, as well as Giovanni Lombardo Radice. These obscure actors who just sort of appeared in a lot of these early 80s Italian films, Italian horror films. And she's all, where did you pick them up from? And she's like, I think they're superb, which is, this is where, like, the writing of this film, there's a lot of merit to some of it. Like, superb, it's such a great word because, one, it It's not a word that Ricky or Alex would use to describe something, but it's also something very much that these socialite types would. But it's also it's not a way to describe a person. Well, maybe you might describe them. Maybe you think Alex's mechanic work is superb, but there's something so extraordinarily condescending about calling these people superb, especially when we know you're calling them that because these aren't the kind of people we would usually hang around with. Um, so then they, yeah, again, look, this mostly works as in the scenes within themselves work. So we have these moments where Ricky starts dancing like such a dork. He's such a dork. And I don't know if I do wonder. Like I remember wondering when I was watching it, if like was it like, hey Giovanni, make sure your dancing's really dorky in this scene, or really play up the dorkiness, or maybe they're like, hey, can you dance? He's like, no. It's like, all right, just dance and just keep doing it because it's really quite embarrassing. I love that they clap him. I love that they egg him on, and you know he's sweating and he takes his shirt off, and it's really sort of funny, but it is a little bit upsetting, right? But then so this is how the film makes us try to dislike the rich people because you know within context they actually really don't have any reason to be doing this to him because they don't know whether Ricky knows that Alex is a murderer or not. He wasn't part of the plan, so they are just sort of doing this for the fun of it. Maybe you could make the case that they're doing it because he's Alex's friend and they're trying to upset Alex, which, by the way, they do. But you know, again, this whole thing is like what all the all right. The scene's still good, but when I'm really thinking about it, and maybe overanalyzing it, I'm sort of going, well, it would have been better if they were just bullying him for the sake of bullying him, which, whilst it feels like they are doing that, maybe you can't not be distracted by the fact that, yes, but Alex is a murderer. All they're doing is making a bit of a mockery of this guy. So, again, you take that scene away from the start, you automatically have a more negative impression of these characters, which is what the film's trying to get you to have. So Alex is off with Mary Poppins in the shower, and it's a pretty good scene. It's really weird, like she's all naked and washing herself excruciatingly slowly, and Alex is undressing himself, and meanwhile, like you know, they're sucking Ricky into a poker game. And again, this is a really good device I think that the film's using because they're not just making a fool of him, but they're making a fool because they rig it. They're making a fool of him specifically in the way that they're meant to be. They're meant to have that gap between they're rich, he's poor, and they end up stealing the money that he actually has, and enriching themselves slightly more with money they clearly don't need. Um, so at one point, there is a moment where like Alex starts shaking his head. I think he says they're playing with your head. I can't remember if that is during the poker game because I've written it down during the poker game, or maybe I think it might be when they're dancing. But anyway, he's able to be swayed with a bit of naked woman because as much as he cares about Ricky, I guess he cares about that a little bit more. So eventually, Alex comes back out. Um, yeah, that's right. He does check. He gives the thumbs up sort of early in the game, and then they go off to the shower, I believe. Um, That's right. During the game, he's all, I'll play light. And Alex says that they're taking him for a ride. He yells at them, says that they're cheating. So they try to beat him up. Now, you know, it is interesting when you get to the end of a movie and then you're like, oh yeah, what was their plan? Like what would the film have been, or what would the story have been if the characters had succeeded? And I guess they would have beaten him up and then they would have killed him. just just then. But of course, Alex is, he's a street fighter. He knows what he's doing. Um, and you know, again, I think this section is really effective at providing sympathy for Ricky, because this is when he starts. Like, I actually quite like his acting. Like, I like a lot of his acting during this film, but um, in this scene, I think he might actually be sweating. Um, but you can feel his anxiety as he's losing all his money, but he's not realizing that the game's fixed. And then Alex comes and lets him know. But after the fight, and I think there's a fight. What happens? He ends up with the knife, and then he's got his knife to a couple of their necks at different points, I think, and like, oh, let's play a bit of poker now. And um, it is interesting that when Ricky says, I've got a royal straight, and I that's one of the rare occasions, I think, when the dubbing is actually really good. Um, I've got a royal straight. It's really effective. It is quite interesting that the guy, I think with the hair, tries to turn the cards over to check, and Ricky puts his hand on it very, very sternly. I've got a real royal straight, and it's good. It's very good filmmaking, really, because you can feel him becoming a bit more animalistic in that moment. And as far as Ricky's concerned, he has every right to. And I mean, under the circumstances, yeah, probably, because they have been dicks to him for no reason, you know. And then everything switches from there, because we already have a fair idea who Alex is, but things change a little bit for Ricky after this point. And yeah, so there's quite a lot of running around and bit knife work and punching and sneaking and pushing the guy in the pool and pissing on him. Which, look, that scene's so funny. The way Alex is laughing at him, the film has a pretty tense. There's a lot of tension in this film. Obviously the first scene. Then there's the tension of, why are these people trying to get them to get in the car and come party? Then there is the party itself, where they're being sort of douchebags. There's the natural awkward tension of the fact that they clearly don't fit in there. Then there's the tension of Alex and the women, the poker game. Then, of course, the violence. Yes, it is effective, and yes, it doesn't seem at all out of character that under those circumstances, Alex would piss on a guy. It's just the way he laughs. It's so victorious and like maniacal that it's just funny. Like, it's so funny. And it is possible that the film undermines itself just a little bit in that, even though that's quite effective. Now, with the film having probably eased away, like, there's tension galore, but it's eased away a little bit from, you know, sick stuff, and we're not we're anxious, but we're not uncomfortable as viewers necessarily. It veers very directly back into that now, and this is where obviously it becomes quite controversial. You know, it becomes it shifts from Alex trying to have sex with Mary Poppins to it just becomes an attempted rape fest. You know, and really, you know, I don't know that the depiction of the issue itself is incorrect or even unimportant, but it is uncomfortable. Like he's now sort of got them at knife point or broken wine bottle point. You know, he says you've never dreamed of ladies like this before. Does Alex to Ricky, and then gives him the first choice of the girls that he wants to have sex with. And at this point, it's like, Ruggiero, weren't you trying to get us to feel sympathy for Alex and Ricky? And again, this is the part of it where you do feel a little bit confused at the end, at least on Ricky's behalf, because it's like, yeah, well, his level of giddy, almost childish excitement at like maybe there's some brilliance in it, right? Like he's very excited. Like, me, I get first choice, but he sounds like a kid who gets to like there's 3 chocolate bars or something, and he gets to, but they're all different. He gets to choose which one. Like, and there's a certain amount of genius in that because it's like he's not this world that he lives in because of Alex is not his natural world. I think that's what I'm trying to say. And he seems uncomfortable in that. Well, at times he seems slightly comfortable in it because he does still have that monstrous, more stinging side, shall we say. But it doesn't seem to be his natural state of being. So there's a lot of shirt ripping and, nudity and all kinds of things going on. And I do feel like the film probably loses the plot a little bit in this section until more interesting things, more memorable things, shall we say, end up happening. The eventually there's that scene where Ricky has chosen. I think I'm named the actress. It might be Lorraine Del Sal or something like that. The Cannibal Ferox lady, and Ricky's trying to work out where he's going to do it, and then Alex is all fuck her here, and it's just like the part of this film that's so well. There are a few parts of it, but David Hess was a natural violent rapist as an actor. That's what I'm trying to say. And his characters are quite similar in this and Last House on the Left, but he's a little bit of he's a rung up in Last House on the Left. But he just has that presence that to minimize rape, to fuck her here. Not many actors could say that line the way he does, and like it feels sort of natural. And just to be clear, I really like David Hess. I think he was a really cool guy, and I suspect he ended up in these roles often because of the way he looks and the presence that he had. He just looks like a serial killer, or looked, should I say. It's we're getting into the very uncomfortable. And then the film maybe tries to add a bit of depth to itself. Ricky can't perform. And Alex is really egging him on because, see, the thing is, as much as Alex is very much on Ricky's side, Alex doesn't really understand Ricky because I think he just wants Ricky to be totally like himself. And Ricky's clearly uncomfortable. I think he says something like, "Oh, she's scared." Oh, that actually might come later when Alex is doing something. Anyway, he tells him to shut up, and this is when the sort of sociopathy of it all really begins to come out. You can see that Alex isn't just a piece of shit. It's like his brain's actually a little bit dysfunctional. And again, the level of cheapness going on in this film to make this aspect of it convincing is quite surprising that it happens, right? So Alex is devastated. He sort of briefly looks like his eyes are wide. He looks around as if looking for support. Like, can you people believe that Ricky's just told me to shut up? And like it, it's almost like this moment actually genuinely throws him for the rest of the film. Like everything, or the hostage aspect of it all, like it begins to go wrong because the one person in the world that he thought he could trust has told him to shut up. It's really quite comical in a way, but he slaps him, says, "But they're friends," and he's sort of walking around mumbling to himself. It's like, my best fucking friend. It's good stuff. Like I think it's well written. I think it's well thought out. And it's really well depicted by David Hess. He really, there's a bit of a vibe with Alex. Like it's like Alex was a bully at school, but eventually didn't have any friends, and it's like Ricky was bullied at school and eventually didn't have any friends. I think that's sort of the dynamic that's going on here. Obviously in different areas, because I think David Hess is probably about 18, 20 years older than Radice. So there's that that's there's that moment where I think he might do it to the maybe the dark skinned lady. I can't remember. It's one of them. They're sitting on the couch. I think because whoever it is, they've like tried to maybe they've tried to call someone something like that, but so little Miss Muffet sat on her tough. It does all that. Like, sat down beside her and scared the living shit out of her, and it's very very funny. But it also does evoke that the infantile again, right? Like that we see a lot in in Ricky, but maybe there's also that element going on in Alex where it's like he was probably a bit fucked up right from the start, right? And it is to use that poem or nursery rhyme or whatever you'd call it, um, you know, it's pretty cool. I think. Got this quote here. See if you can do something right for a change and keep these rich assholes under control. So that is sort of like the crux of like Deodato's attempts to have us like, or at least sympathize with Ricky. And it's like, yes, but I don't know. You're a little bit worse, Alex, I guess is what I'd say. So from here, I feel like the disturbance really just keeps piling on top of itself. So he takes Alex takes Mary Poppins to bed, and it's sensual to an extent, and sensuality is a very big part of a lot of the rest of the film. So it's like it's in that sense the film is very effective, right? Because that's apart from sweetly playing at the start of the film, there's not a lot of it happening until maybe until you know Ricky starts trying to rape Lorraine DeSalle, but he's really trying to have sex with her in a sensual way. You know, and we move from the slightly fucked up to the utterly disturbing from really here on in. So, you know, in his interview on the DVD, actually, David Hess says that him and this Mary Poppins actor lady had a lot of chemistry and possibly even something of a relationship, I believe, off screen. And that he said, you know, that the way this scene happened, that was a result of them actually having chemistry. You know, that wasn't necessarily a lot of acting going on there. So there's a slightly sensual scene that happens. Yeah. So anyway, that happens, and Ricky, I think, tells like at some point someone's turned the light off, and he's screaming, "I want to turn the light back on. I can't stand it with the light not on." And it's like, you know, the film's really trying to depict Ricky in this childish way. So the Cannibal Ferox woman, she eventually runs out of the house, tries to get help, and Ricky gets her. And I think there's a little bit of there's a little bit of uh, interchange between this scene and what's going on in the house. But I'll just talk about this thing that happens. And this is where the film, it's like there's a lot of interesting stuff going on, but it's like you really need to get your priorities in order because the result is often quite disturbing. So, you know, he's all like, I don't want to hurt you. And again, really good voice acting. And it's a very sensual scene. The problem with this scene, and I felt this from the first time I ever watched the movie, I've watched it a number of times, is it's very difficult to not get the impression, because I have a feeling they have sex twice, but obviously we've seen films in the past where there's been rapes and the woman accepts that's what's going to happen, right? And goes along and to try to survive. The problem with this scene is it gives a distinct impression that she has decided she wants to have sex with him anyway, because she's already reasoned, or she does reason with him. You know, he's a murderer. He's like, she's telling Ricky, like, she can see that he's not evil, or at least he's not as evil as Alex. But put it this way, with everything going on, I think she would easily be able to deduce that she doesn't need to have sex with Ricky to get him on side. So what I feel like is happening here is the movie, you know, I feel like scripts change a bit. Scenes happen. Again, you know, how I have been teasing that I'll talk about in a little bit, but scenes happen a certain way. They just sort of happen a certain way. I'm not necessarily sure this is what the film wanted to do, but I cannot watch that whole sequence and get out of my head like, this is a really disturbing thing that the film's doing, because it's not just disturbing things happening. It's like it's disturbing motivations and character actions. Like why would she have willingly had sex with him in this situation, and why on earth does the film give the impression that she wanted to? It's utterly bizarre. It really, really is. Now, again, it's thought-provoking, and maybe in and of itself that's a positive. I don't know. And I really do think so much. Again, there's a really good chemistry between these two. Maybe that's what led to them both being cast in Cannibal Ferox the next year. But it's just troubling. And the trouble just continues from here. So then we get Cindy, and to be honest, I feel like this is the height of the disturbing stuff in the film, because Cindy shows up. They really wanted to leave, and she's quite young looking, and she's got a very petite figure. I don't know how old the actress would have been. I'm sure she was in her 20s or something. But when she comes in, initially she's really flirting with Alex. It's like, I'd never seen you around before, all that kind of stuff. But what's particularly disturbing about it, I think, and this isn't necessarily a criticism, by the way. In fact, it's probably not a criticism at all. What's disturbing about it is she's got that, she's attractive, she's very cute, and she's got that, like, oh, who's this guy? I don't know who he is. That she's going to, not in a negative way, but she's going to use that the appeal, that natural appeal that attractive women have to men. She's going to use that, and she's going to flirt with this guy a little bit. And I think she goes to kiss him a little bit. It's so disturbing to know that she's doing that when he's the person that he is, and then what he ends up doing to her. And see, this is one of the issues with Deodato. He didn't pull punches at all. So it's like, I'm not just going to make a film about rape. I'm not just going to make a film about cannibal holocausts. I'm going to really do it. So Cindy very quickly realizes that he's a bit fucked up. He starts undressing her, and this whole sequence is disturbing. It's really off the charts. You see some of the looks that are being given from the actors, like the dark skinned lady. You see a couple of the shots from her are very, very telling. So David Hess is doing his thing. He's ripped Cindy's clothes off. He's touched her and says, "Oh, she's a virgin," and it's like he's getting this giddy joy out of this. And I want to be clear. I'm not saying the film actually doesn't, actually, the film is certainly not blasé about this topic. Not at all. I think, given it's depicting it, I think it's depicting it in a way that is very, very thought provoking and utterly disturbing. However, it does make you go, why are they doing this, a little bit? Because there is a lot of rape going on and a lot of crap going on. Like, it's just very hard to watch, I guess, is my point. But the point at which you begin to feel like this isn't just unpleasant, this is borderline disgraceful, is that when Cindy, I don't know the actress's name, when Cindy comes into the house, it's very clear that she's the kind of actress that would appear in a film, a very cheap film, without a massive role, because she's not really an actress, or not really one with any kind of, quality. During the sequence where he's undressing her and finding out she's a virgin, she's an extraordinarily good actress, as are a lot of the onlookers, or a couple of the onlookers, a couple of the girls. And none of them are really good actors outside of that, which would indicate that the people who were experiencing this on set were actually disturbed. And that's the part of it that's very hard to deal with. And I don't want to be misinterpreted as, some woke person or something like that. When horrible things are happening to people on set, it's tough. I think it's tough. And there's an element, there's a particular look that one of them gives, the dark skinned one. She sort of narrows her eyes at one point, and and she looks so uncomfortable. It's almost as if, and I'm speculating here, but I borderline suspect this is true. She actually can't believe what David Hess is doing, and at that point, you've probably overdone it, movie. So he slashes her up a lot, and you know, anyway, anything can be gratuitous. I don't actually think this is gratuitous because somewhere in this sequence, Ricky starts going, Alex, you've got to stop. Remember that girl in the park last year, referring to the girl that he raped and killed in the opening scene. And then you realize Ricky knows. And see, at that moment, it's like the film sort of, I think, justifies that thing I was saying earlier about he this is his nature, yes, but it's more that he gets out of control, and I think that's I think that's quite a significant thing, because it's like it doesn't feel when Cindy comes in, or even when he starts to undress her, that he has intentions of like cutting her up and stuff, but he slashes her a lot. And there's a little disclaimer at the start of the film version that I have anyway, that it lists a bunch of, well, it mightn't have been at the start of the film, but anyway, on the DVD somewhere, it lists a bunch of things in that were actually taken out of the film, and I think most of them, or some of them at least, were in this scene where we see him doing a lot of stuff to Cindy, and it's like what we see, and I'm pretty sure it doesn't remain in the film. What we see is still pretty disturbing. But it's like, I try to put it as bluntly as I can. If you're going to put that in a film, knowing how people react to it, you'd want to make damn well sure that the people that are participating in shooting it are actually comfortable doing it. And I really get the impression that the actress playing Cindy was very far from comfortable. So, that's probably all I need to say about that. Then Ricky tries to stop Alex, and we come to my favourite moment in the film, maybe my favourite moment in any film ever. Now, that's overdoing it. But I'll say why I love this film so much. So he goes up and tries to stop him or whatever, and he naturally, he just stabs him somewhere in the midriff somewhere. And it's such a fucking good scene, okay? So Alex stabs him, and he's devastated. He's like, why'd you make me do it? Why'd you turn against me? It's always been you and me. It's always been you and me, kid, together. It's like, and then it's like it's already insane, but it's there's something so brilliant about it, because it's like not only has he done this, not only is it not his fault, but not only is it the rich people's fault for making him do it, but he says it in a way as if the way he's talking, it's like he thinks that Ricky agrees with him. So it's like, they're all fucking bastards. They did this to you. They're trying to make us turn on each other. It's like, what do they know about friendship anyway? It's so good. It's so good. But, I can't do justice to the quality of the scene, because I think the acting of both of them is brilliant in this scene. So much so, and I think I've referred to this in the past, that I actually I found out that Giovanni Lombardo Radice had a website. I probably did this about maybe 8 years ago. I emailed him specifically about this scene. I referred to this scene. I don't know if I can actually find the email, but it was bloody cool. I said, to the effect of, hey, Giovanni, in the context of this film, this scene seemed quite out of place or surprising because it's very effective and it's very well acted. And I asked him, like, how does a film like this come about? And I was genuinely curious. Like, how does a scene like this come about? Like, on such a cheap film, like, is this direction? Is it improv? And I think he said a few different things, but regarding the actual scene, he said to the effect of, "No, Italian directors don't really tell you what to do." Like, and I thought it was fucking brilliant. Like, so this brilliant scene, I feel like they sort of had some kind of guideline and then just go nuts. And there was such a satisfying answer because that's exactly what it felt like. Like, not that it's because it's not out of character for what the characters are doing. It's just that you know you just didn't expect this to be happening in this film, right? Like, it's you know it's an unbelievable scene, and the music in the background, it really really is good because at this point it's like the whole world actually sort of has turned on Alex now because and I don't believe Ricky speaks at all during this scene because it's like the film's now it's entered insanity and it knows it and it's deliberate. It's like that sort of insane level of sociopathy where it's like we're now seeing how the brain works, and it's like it doesn't work. Like, no, Alex, they didn't make you do it. Because it would already be because he's already done it early in the film, right? It's like, he's sort of blamed Ricky for telling him to shut up, as in Ricky's bad for telling him to shut up, but Alex doesn't feel he's bad for trying to egg him on to rape someone. But now it's like, no, like it would be insane if he thought it was Ricky's fault, but it's even more insane than that because, like, no, it's not your fault. It's not my fault. They've they've done it, and it's just brilliant. So there's a bit of chaos that happens now. Eventually, they get a gun and they shoot him, and then it all gets a bit poetic and just so. They shoot him a couple of times. He ends up in the pool, as he's kicked the gorilla, as I think he calls him early in the film. And yeah, they drag him out of the pool, and the brother, there's a part of me that's like, I'm a little bit torn in this moment. So pulls him out of the pool, and the way he does it, it's like he's leaving himself very exposed. So it's like the film, it's saying, you've just spent all this time, you've brought this guy here specifically to kill him because he killed your sister, and he's leaving himself very exposed. But there's just something, as the scene goes on, I think it needs that because the film wants to make Alex really pathetic in this situation. Because he is pathetic. That's the thing. He's a pathetic little man, but he appears as a strong, big, physical man. And by having this guy, this rich guy who doesn't know anything about cars, who doesn't know anything about guns apparently, and like he's exposed, and if he was in the right state, he could beat him up, but he's got no energy left because he's been shot a number of times. Then he explains to him that that girl you raped or you killed in the park, that was my sister. Again, reasonable voice acting. Well, I'm not sure the voice actually matches the actor, but that's another point. And you can see the look of horror of Alex on his face. On Alex's face. It's like, and the set was all a setup, which is a Cannibal Holocaust thing as well. All a setup. Anyway, and I think the horror is probably partly that it's probably he realizes he's actually totally fucked here, but also that, like, I mean, I'm clearly imposing this on the film myself, but I'll just do that. That, like, you know, any sense of justification he had is totally gone, right? Because he at least, oh, it's their fault. They're all bastards. All that is like gone because even the people that he thinks are bad, that he can sort of justify in his mind why his life's tough. It's like, no, they did that because you deserved it. So it's like the horror in his face is, I'm going to speculate, is partly that all the things that he's managed to convince himself about himself that are good just wash away there. Speaking of washing away, the the ape or whatever he calls him comes, and I think it's quite effective when he says, I'll help you, I'll help you. And again, this adds to how pathetic it is because Alex seems to think he is going to help him up, and he puts his arms around him like in this hugging fashion. And it's probably a rare case of, let's call it a rape revenge film, because now that I think about it, it is absolutely a rape revenge film, where the revenge actually does feel quite effective because they don't just get the revenge in that they kill him, but they destroy everything about him, right? Like he felt so powerful. There was a big part of it throughout the film that he's stronger and he's able to sort of control this group of people with himself and Ricky. There's like 7 of them, and 2 of them are men, and he's able to control them. And now, like, he's not doing that dignified, well, I'm going to die, but I'm going to go with a fight, or I'm going to accept my fate. It's like, no, I'm going to try to get them to help me. This guy's going to help me. And then as that final insult, he then sings, Cindy, oh Cindy, you're going to die. And it's, when he throws him into the water and then shoots him in the head, it's like, it's very effective, I think. Honestly, it's really, really good. And then they get that sort of wrap up moments with, in the what is it? The thing I was quoting earlier from the brother about how about how many rounds can go off if you don't know how to use one of these things. Anyway, all a bit of a wank, and the brother says he's going to be the only one that fired, and like they're going to get away with it and stuff. See, again, I don't think Deodato mentioned this in the interview, but it is that, given what I know he thinks or thought about the film, like was a part of it, like, oh well, of course the rich people are going to be able to get away with this because they are clever, and that it's like if you don't know how to use one of these things, the idea being they shot him a number of times, but no one else used a gun, so they're all going to get away with it. But at the same time, like, well, I hope they get away with it because he deserved it, And then there's a bit of a silly. Well, I mean, I'm not against the moment where they go to shoot Ricky and then the Ferox lady says not to, because it is a good, and and he's so pathetic and he's screaming for them to do it, but then he's very relieved when they don't. So it's like he feels like he deserves to die, but he also doesn't want to. And that, to be honest, like, give it like it happens right at the end. It's a it's a good thing, I think, because it wraps it up and it gives us that final thing to sort of reflect on. But then that quote, like, oh, you don't make decisions around here anymore because the ape guy wants to do it. So what the fuck does that mean? Do we know anything about that? Like, I just think that's just a poor line of dialogue. It doesn't need to be there. It doesn't seem to have anything to do with anything else. But anyway, then Alex dies in the pool, and the credits roll, and Sweetly Oh Sweetly starts playing over the credits, which I think is really effective. But everything I've said would indicate that I think that. So that concludes my discussion of The House on the Edge of the Park. I think it's a great movie. I hope it hasn't been too rambling. I'm very glad to be back. I'll give you a bit of a preview of the year ahead. So I have 4 podcasts that I will be doing monthly. I think that's a bit more manageable because it tends to get on top of me, and then I end up doing nothing. So I would say podcasts that are relevant to listeners for this. Well, I've got the Horror Film Science podcast where I talk often about horror films, but also about other films. And I'm going to be doing a pod that'll be out in the next, well, very soon actually. That'll be on the film There Will Be Blood. And, that'll be a wonderful discussion, I think. So, yeah, I'm still to set the exact date, but what I'm thinking is I'll have a sort of setup where it'll be a particular day, let's say every second Sunday of each month. Until then, I've been the Italian Horror Guy, and this is the Italian Horror Guy podcast. Waiting just for you.